For former Trump administration officials as another ignored his and skipped out meeting before members of Congress. An empty chair marked the spot where former White House counsel Don McGahn was supposed to sit during a hearing to talk about the Mueller report. Well, the White House didn't want him to testify. Even though he's no longer an employee at the White House, he respected those wishes, sat this one out. That didn't go over well with Judiciary Chairman Gerald Nadler. And his allies fighting back hard, arguing that Democrats have McGahn's testimony already in the Mueller report. They just seem to want to turn a book into a movie.
Fox's David Spunt. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is calling a meeting on Wednesday to discuss an impeachment strategy. Pelosi is feeling the heat from a small but growing number of House Democrats calling for impeachment proceedings against President Trump. Protests erupting in Indonesia's capital. Supporters of the losing presidential candidate are burning vehicles and throwing rocks at police using tear gas and rubber bullets. The protesters tried to force their way into the election supervisory agency offices. Dozens of people have been detained. The storm system that has caused death and destruction in the plains and Midwest will finally weaken Wednesday. Missouri and parts of Illinois hit with severe weather for the second straight day. In Missouri, heavy rains are blamed for at least 2 deaths. The mayor in Tulsa, Oklahoma, says a tornado spotted near the airport injured 1 person there.
I signed an emergency declaration that really begins the implementation of our emergency response plan.
The National Weather Service says another storm gathering steam could impact areas from Texas to Chicago. This is Fox News.
Hey, it's Mom. Somebody forgot to thaw the chicken, so meet us at Chili's for 2 for $25. Oh, and congratulate your sister for making the basketball team. She's thrilled. Love you. See you at Chili's.
Enjoy 2 full meal combos for $25. An appetizer, 2 mouth-watering entrees like our crispy chicken breast, smoked barbecue quarter leg, or smoked jalapeno cheddar sausage. Served with corn on the cob and french fries. 2 bold combos for $25. A full-on meal deal available nightly for a limited time. Together, we Chili's.
If you've ever struggled for breath, you know what a scary experience it is. Whether you have asthma, emphysema, COPD, lung cancer, or another respiratory illness, the right medical treatment makes all the difference. GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic has the latest technology and respiratory equipment, staffed by world-class pulmonologists. Make an appointment today with GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic and start breathing easier. GRMC, where patients are partners.
Feathers fly in the Texas legislature over a bill defending fast food chain Chick-fil-A and its stances on LGBT issues.
The measure was put on the fast track in the state house after San Antonio council members blocked Chick-fil-A from opening a location at the city's airport. Republican supporters of the bill say it's an offense of religious freedom and the right of a business to donate to certain causes without suffering retribution. But opponents predict it will only stoke discrimination against the LGBT community. Some openly gay lawmakers tearfully railed against it on the House floor Tuesday. Republicans say the legislation contains no discriminatory language, and in a tweet, GOP Governor Greg Abbott indicated he'll sign it. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
The legal battle into Jussie Smollett's alleged assault case continues, a former judge filing new motions to get the case before a different judge to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate why charges were dropped against the Empire actor. The court papers also request State's Attorney Kim Foxx turn over files on the case. A new accusation of misconduct against Michael Jackson emerges.
Former pop artist Aaron Carter's claiming he once had an inappropriate encounter with Michael Jackson. The 31-year-old singer says he believed Jackson was overall a really good guy, but added there was one time he did something that was a little bit inappropriate. Carter is the younger brother of Backstreet Boys star Nick Carter. He opened up about the encounter in the upcoming season of Marriage Boot Camp, Reality Stars Family Edition. He'll appear along with Jane Carter, his mother. Now, the King of Pop had been charged with molestation back in 2005, found not guilty. Allegations of abuse, though, once again resurfacing after the HBO documentary Leaving Neverland. John Saucier, Fox News.
A 6-week-old kitten was rescued from a San Francisco Bay Area storm drain. A woman heard meowing and looked down to see the tiny feline at the bottom of the drain. A deputy jumped down to rescue the orange and white calico. The kitten was examined and could be up for adoption soon. I'm Richard Jordan, and this is Fox News.
Ready to buy real estate on Guam? Congratulations! But what now? There are so many questions, so many things to do. Where do you start? The best place to start is to call Century 21 Commonwealth Realty, Guam's biggest name in real estate. They aren't the best because they're the biggest. They're the biggest because they're the best. Trust the name. Find out why. Call Century 21 Commonwealth Realty today. 888-2121. Trust the best.
Let's go for a drive.
Let's take a stroll. Let's gallivant.
Let's go cruising.
We all have different ways to describe how we get up and go in our cars. But whatever you may call it, you can do more of it when you save 6% off your fuel purchases at any Shell station when you use your eligible Bank of Guam Visa and MasterCard credit cards. So stop by any Guam or CNMI Shell station and start saving today. Visit bankofguam.com for more information. Terms and conditions apply. Bank of Guam, the People's Bank. Member FDIC.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thus saith Bob every day at the beginning of every episode of the most exciting, informative, entertaining afternoon talk show in the Western Pacific. And it's no wonder that Tall Tales is the top-rated FM radio talk show, afternoon radio talk show in the entire Western Pacific. How can we miss? Not only do you have your stellar, spectacular, ever modest host, but I'm also backed up by the real Joe Cruz. Not an ersatz Joe Cruz, not a faux Joe Cruz, but the real Joe Cruz. Are you here today, real Joe Cruz? Listen to that round of applause he just gave himself. Very good, real Joe Cruz. Okay, so we always start out with the Second Amendment. I think the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are so important that they ought to be talked about every day, and that's exactly what we do here in Tall Tales. One way or another, we spend some time talking about things like individual freedom and individual rights and our Bill of Rights. And we also contrast that with other approaches to government like identity politics and socialism and some of these other rather heinous approaches to government that man has brought upon himself. So today I have a reading that I want to do. It's from a website called AmmoLand, and it was submitted to me by one of our international radio listening audience members, knowing that I'm always looking for something here that kind of fills in some of the gaps on the Second Amendment, tells you what it's about, who likes it, who doesn't like it, who wants to take it away from us. So here it goes. And I've touched on this before, but this is a little different slant. The United States Department of Justice has submitted an amicus curiae brief on the New York Rifle and Pistol Club case. The Supreme Court has agreed to decide the case. It will, and that's good, cert granted. It will likely be hearing arguments on the case in October of 2019. The brief submitted by Solicitor General Noel Francisco concludes that the Supreme Court should reverse the appeals court ruling and hold the New York City law to be unconstitutional. The brief argues the New York law violates both the right to bear arms outside the home and the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution. The Commerce Clause. Now we've talked about that quite a bit before, and it's an important part of the U.S. Constitution because it's theoretically the base upon which Congress enacts legislation that, in my humble estimation, is ultra-virus its authority. But this is Article 1, Section 8, the United States Constitution, Paragraph 3. The Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. One of Congress's greatest one of the greatest grants of power to Congress. Now, you notice it didn't say territories in there, so there is a case, Sakamoto versus duty-free shoppers, that holds that the Commerce Clause restrictions don't apply to the territory of Guam, which is a good break for us. Just one of those other benefits that accrue to unincorporated territories, contrary to the propaganda of some who think that unincorporated territory is the worst possible status you could have. Not so. But anyhow, Francisco's brief says that the New York firearm statute violates not only the Second Amendment, but the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution. The brief does not address the right to carry arms outside the home for purpose of self-defense of self, others, and the community, which is an obvious part of bearing arms. The argument submitted is well stated in the summary of the brief. Here is the summary of the amicus curiae brief submitted by the U.S. Department of Justice. It says, New York City's transport ban infringes the right to keep and bear arms guaranteed by the Second and 14th Amendments. In District of Columbia versus Heller, this court held that the Second Amendment protects the right of a law-abiding, responsible citizen to keep a firearm in his home for lawful purposes such as self-defense. That's all that D.C. versus Heller and McDonald versus Chicago hold. They don't get into the bear. They only interpret the keep arms, not bear arms. In this course, the court should confirm that the Second Amendment also protects the right of a law-abiding, responsible citizen to take his firearm outside his home and to transport to other places, such as a second home or a firing range where he may lawfully possess the firearm. The Second Amendment guarantees both the right to keep and the right to bear firearms, not the same thing. Read naturally, the right to bear firearms includes the right to transport firearms outside the home. Otherwise, the right to bear would add nothing to the right to keep. And once again, vocabulary is really important. We've got the word bear and we've got the word keep. They have different meanings. I keep my coffee pot at home. That's where it always stays. I could bear it. I could carry it with me if I were so inclined, but I don't. I keep it at home. Now, my wallet, I bear. Whenever I leave the house, I always have my wallet with me. And, of course, I keep it at home. So I keep and bear my wallet. But as far as my coffee pot, I just keep it at home. And right now, the Supreme Court has said that people have the right to keep firearms at their homes. Supreme Court has not interpreted the word bear. So there's not a Supreme Court decision that says, yeah, you got a right to run around outside your house carrying a firearm. We know that the Ninth Circuit has reached that result here where we live, but it's not, the Supreme Court hasn't done that. Read naturally, the right to bear firearms includes the right to transport firearms outside the home. Otherwise, the word to bear would add nothing to the right to keep. In addition, the right to keep arms on its own implies the right to transport firearms between the home and at least some places outside the home. For instance, the place of purchase. How can you keep a firearm at home if you can't buy it at a store and then carry it from the store to your house? In other words, bear it, B-E-A-R, bear it from the store where you bought the gun to the house where you're going to keep it. Like other rights, the right to transport firearms is not absolute. Determine whether a law violates this right. A court should look first to the text of the Second Amendment. Now, that's a radical proposal. Let's see what the words say. I hope that a couple of folks from the CCU are listening, because that lesson seems to escape them. If you want to know what the law says, you got to read the law. A court should look first at the text of the Second Amendment, the history of the right to keep and bear arms before ratification, and the tradition of gun regulation after ratification. In Heller versus Chicago, the court held that the District of Columbia's near complete ban on the possession of handguns in the home violated the Second Amendment because the district had totally banned an activity protected by the Second Amendment's text. Because few laws in the history of our nation have come close to the severe restriction of the District of Columbia's handgun ban, and because some of these have been struck down. Let's see here. What else is important in this case? In any event, the ban violates the Commerce Clause. Petitioners also contend that the ban on transporting firearms to firing ranges outside the city violates the dormant Commerce Clause. I should have warned, get your Law and Order notebooks out here for this. The dormant Commerce Clause and the right to interstate travel. Because the ban violates the Second Amendment, the court need not reach these additional constitutional arguments. In any event, the ban violates the dormant Commerce Clause. Under that doctrine, a state or local government ordinarily may not discriminate against interstate commerce in favor of local commerce. On its face, the transport ban discriminates against interstate commerce. It allows a licensed holder to take his firearm to a local firing range, but precludes him from taking his firearm to a range outside the city. So the Commerce Clause, I just read the Commerce Clause, and I read the word dormant, the dormant Commerce Clause. So here's your finer point of law for today. A state law that attempts to regulate interstate commerce, or put it this way, the national government has the ability to regulate commerce between states. So if you're shipping something from Wisconsin to within Wisconsin, at least in theory, the Commerce Clause doesn't apply. Unfortunately, it's only in theory. But when you ship to Illinois, then the Commerce Clause does apply. And Congress has enacted several laws pursuant to the Commerce Clause to regulate commerce. But suppose Congress has not used the Interstate Commerce Clause to enact any laws. Does that mean that a state may regulate interstate commerce? Because after all, the federal Congress has not enacted a law. And the answer to that is no. And that's where the dormant Commerce Clause comes in. The mere fact that there is a Commerce Clause means that states cannot regulate interstate commerce. So that's what this case is about. And this is a really important case. The Supreme Court has granted the petition for certiorari to bring the New York Rifle and Pistol Club versus the City of New York, to bring that case before the Supreme Court for argument. And our very own national government has weighed in on the side of the appellant on the Rifle and Pistol Club, saying, New York City, your law is must be stricken. Well, what do you expect? It is, after all, New York, right? Okay, so I've got the real Joaquin on the line. This is not just any Joaquin. This is the real one, right? Okay, real Joaquin, how are you doing this afternoon?
Yeah, Bob, I'm one of the 50 in Guam. You probably remember me. You hosted me at your house in New Mexico years ago.
Oh, yeah. I remember you, Ken. How you doing?
Doing okay, and I enjoy listening to your programs. Very educational.
Thank you.
Anyway, if the Commerce Clause does not apply to Guam, then what advantage does that give Guam, or do we ever take advantage of it?
Well, we did in the case of duty-free shoppers versus, as you were, Sakamoto versus duty-free shoppers, because the activities of the airport with respect to some of the sales that they authorized at the airport might have been violative of the antitrust laws of the United States, which are pinned to the Commerce Clause. But the Ninth Circuit said no, Commerce Clause does not apply to Guam.
Okay.
Okay, Ken?
Okay. Anyway, just one advice to anybody out there whose name is Joaquin Pangilinan. Check your property at land management. There might be a lien on it, because I was blamed twice for somebody else's hospital bill just because the name is Joaquin Pangilinan.
Wow. So being called Joaquin Pangilinan might generate debt recovery. Is that it, Ken?
That's it. So, Anyway, thank you for giving us 2 minutes.
You're welcome, Ken. Always nice to talk to you.
Okay. Take care.
Yeah. So that's the real Joaquin. Yeah. Okay. So anyhow, good news on the Second Amendment front. The Supreme Court has the opportunity now to give further interpretation to the language of the Second Amendment. Keep and bear arms, because that fact pattern will be squarely before it. That's good news. The fact that we have 5 judges five judges that have 2 hands, 4 that only apparently have a left hand. Well, no, that's not quite right, but it is tall tales after all. But we do have 5 judges that the left vilifies as being horror of horrors, the worst possible thing that a judge could be, a conservative. Whoa. Now, see, that's right up there with the boogeyman, So, we have a Supreme Court that is probably not going to be hostile to the Second Amendment, to the Constitution in general. And we have the government of the United States, the Solicitor General of the United States, Noel Francisco, filing an amicus brief in favor of the gun club, the party that's advancing this expansive theory of the Second Amendment against the city of New York, which, of course, takes an extremely cramped approach to the Second Amendment. So, gun owners out there, today is a good day. So, having disposed, figuratively anyhow, of the Second Amendment, we move from there to what's next on the schedule here?
Zemi-i-Kutni, sir.
Zemi-i-Kutni. And as you may recall, this is that portion of the program where I, first of all, determine whether or not the Daily News editorial is a plagiarized piece. Second, whether or not it has any merit. And I have a new blue pencil today. The old one, I guess, was getting frayed, not afraid, but frayed, because I had been marking up so many editorials. So I broke down and got a new blue pencil. So I'll go through the editorials and mark them up on grammar and usage and content, and give the better of the two a blue star. So I notice I got Francis on the line here. Let me just chat with Francis for a second. Good afternoon, Francis.
Good afternoon, Zutz.
I've got Francis versus Trini is the first item on my card. Should I skip Meet the Press and go to the first item on the card? I can do that.
Maybe if I'm willing to wait.
Okay, well, can you just give me maybe 5 minutes, and then I'll get right back to you?
All right, sure, I'll call back.
Okay, thanks, Francis.
You're
So the PDN editorial today is this: our view, immunize to protect against whooping cough. Now, where were they when I was coming in here every day telling you to cover up the loudspeaker on your phone because I was racked with this nagging cough and coughing every day? Where were they with this editorial then? And where were they with their inoculations and things? Not very timely. When I really needed you, you weren't there. Whooping cough is the common name for pertussis, a highly contagious respiratory disease caused by a bacteria. It's usually treated with antibiotics. Last week, the Department of Public Health confirmed that a 7-month-old baby was found to have pertussis. This needs to highlight to parents the importance of ensuring their children have up-to-date vaccinations against pertussis and other diseases. This disease is primarily spread by direct contact with discharge from the nose and throat of infected individuals and from the speakers on phones and radios tuned to a radio station where the host is coughing into the microphone. No, I just added that, and that's not what it really says, Real Joe Cruz. Infants who aren't immunized or incompetent and completely immunized are particularly vulnerable. As of mid-October 2018, there had been 30 confirmed cases of pertussis. So anyhow, I think we get the point. Whooping cough is bad. Pertussis is bad. The way that you can prevent whooping cough, pertussis, etc., is getting vaccinated and minimizing exposure to people with cold symptoms or cough. So getting vaccinated. Now, I'm not going to go into it now, but there is a new group of activists in the country called the anti-vaxxers. And they're saying, we don't need no stinking vaccinations. Vaccinations are bad. So I hope we don't have anti-vaxxers here on the island. But anyhow, the point here is get vaccinated. And then here's another one that some people, some of our international radio listening audience will embrace. Stay home when you're sick. Public Health also urges people to stay home from school or work when sick, to cover their mouths and noses with tissue when coughing or sneezing, and to wash their hands often. That's the call to action. Well, that's the editorial here for today. This might have made an interesting news story if it had been an interview of someone at Public Health, a doctor, an immunologist, a person with a really, really bad cough. You could probably do some kind of a cartoon if you did a story about a guy with a really bad cough with a picture of this person really coughing hard. As an editorial, it's pretty weak, Daily News. It's pretty weak. And then we go to the Post. The Post says health insurance for foster children must be insured. The way a local public health official described it recently, she didn't expect any problems to occur when the government of Guam's funding for private health insurance for more than 200 children in the foster care program soon runs out. This budget year, which ends in September, $549,000 had been budgeted to pay for foster children's health insurance under Calvo Select Care. That money is expected to run out at the end of this month. When that happens, foster children will be simply covered by another health insurance plan, this time under the federally funded Children's Health Insurance Program, commonly known as CHIP. And then the Test Archangel quote. Now, we covered this yesterday on the card, and it was the title of the card was Foster Kids versus $549,000. And kind of the point that I drew out of it is that if we don't have to spend $549,000 for this, why are we doing it? And then I also, my devious mind also said, did somebody plant this story to create the impression that there's $549,000 that we don't need to spend on this insurance program? Therefore, we could spend it on something else? What do you think it could be spent on, Real Joe Cruz?
Hairdos.
Well, there's been a very vocal group. Yeah, for you, yeah. There's been a very vocal group in the community that's been advocating for money, right, to build a lab. I don't know. Maybe I'm just looking for something that's not there. Anyhow, the editorial goes on to say that not all pediatricians and other doctors on Guam accept Medicaid patients because of the delay between the time doctors provide services to the patients and the payments from GovGuam. Medicaid payments to doctors have taken months in some cases. GovGuam has just a little more than a week remaining to get this sorted out. GovGuam has become really creative and has moved briskly when it came to allowing gambling money to be raised for the Liberation Carnival. Boo! Approving legislation for the recreational marijuana industry, approving public officials' raises, and signing off on government-funded travel and per diem costs. This time, we'll see if the same bureaucratic wheels of urgency will be set in motion for the children in foster care. Yeah. Okay, Francis, this would be a really good time for you to give me a buzz, and we'll pick you up right after the break. In the meantime, I'm awarding the Blue Star to the Post and getting ready for Francis's call.
2-for-1 dinner time is back at Ruby Tuesday Guam. That's 2 fresh garden bars, 2 tasty entrees, and a sweet dessert to share for just $25.99. 2-for-1 dinner time for a limited time at Ruby Tuesday Guam.
Legends aren't born, they are made. And during our Jeep celebration event at Cars Plus and Mighty, you'll receive up to $6,000 in accessories with the purchase of a new Jeep Wrangler, Motor Trend SUV of the Year. Customize your new Jeep to the way you want it. Or how about a new Jeep Grand Cherokee? Save up to $5,000. Or save up to $7,500 on a new Jeep Compass Sport. It's our Jeep celebration event going on now at Cars Plus and Mighty. Cars Plus, driven by you. Accessory special cannot be combined with other offers. See dealer for details.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
If I asked you to give me 10 minutes and I'd make you healthier and happier, would you do it? I'm Jerry Robertson. At 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of things you can do in 10 minutes that you'll be glad you did.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
And if you're on Facebook, how about hitting that share button here? Do your friends and your Facebook friends a big favor and cut them in on this excellent program while you're thinking about it. Francis, thank you very much for accommodating that part of the program we refer to as Zemi Ikotni.
You're welcome. Before I recall this morning's communication, I was reading something out of the National Lampoon Law and Order section, where a judge was asking a defendant if he did in fact owe the neighbor $1,000, and he said, "Yes, Your Honor." And the judge kind of slipped out and says, "Why don't you just pay him back?" And he answered, well, then it wouldn't be true anymore. Would that be?
Yeah, then it wouldn't be.
So,
yeah, that sounds right to me, Francis. Yeah, sounds kind of like the CCU. You know, they can't give away those minutes, otherwise they would be wrong, right?
yes, sir. This morning I was listening, and Trini called in, and surprised the hell out of me because instead of the continuation of the subject, she was talking about the medical benefits of apple cider vinegar.
Well, these things are important. Yeah.
And that just blew me away. But anyway, some of the veterans, the elders, wanted to attend these meetings that she had at the park, but after cleaning up, helping out, pick up trash and mowings and bush cutting, stuff like that, there was just, they ate and nothing happened. So when I had the conversation, I was merely asking a lot of questions about independence. But then again, before I go on, Trini at the end, after giving an advice on the apple cider vinegar and its benefits, in less than a sentence, she mentioned about the independence and that all she wanted to do was all she wanted was her freedom. And I recommended she pay a visit down to the veteran cemetery,
All she wanted was her freedom, huh?
Her freedom, and I recommended she visit the veteran cemetery.
Yeah, good call, Francis.
Yeah. Anyway, some of the issues that I really wanted to, was all about something, the old notes that we had from the labor laws, immigration, and how it would be with the independence. What do you call it? Status,
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to really get into it, but she completely ignored me and told me that I wasn't educated enough to get involved in her group and stuff like that, and to answer. And she claimed that I was just reading off the paper and stuff like that,
Mm.
That kind of was an insult to me. Those were my rights, I believe, was violated. Just to question, just to question and find out what in the hell are you guys up to, and where's all this proposal and all this information besides your private little meetings that you're having, Anyway, then I went on to question some of the, I don't know if you remember, there was on my notes, the Guam legislature that entitled the economic factors in the economic factors in relation to the political status of Guam. And then there was another one, the political status report from the Political Status Commission back then, that were very stressed about the fact that while alien investments contributed so much substantially to the prosperity of Guam, and if these investments are allowed to continue unchecked, the alien or foreign investment may eventually control the economic resources of the island. So this was a long time ago, and they were concerned and they were really stressed about it. But then again, nothing really followed after that. And so I was wondering if they were expecting us to pursue these issues, And that was just some. The immigration part was that was the United States under Immigration Act, 1924, where the congressional, the U.S. Congress had full control of admissions, right, Bob?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, all I wanted was to hear if Babakwa wanted to establish a new so-called relationship, U.S. and or federal and local military or affairs, relationship some kind of mutual respect between the federal and local relationship that would improve the relationship. Maybe in hopes of working closer and better together.
That's a good idea.
Some of the things I wanted, and they just completely they didn't know what to say. So with that, I'll quit right there, and maybe you can enlighten me. And maybe because I had to take some medication this morning after a very grueling day with appointments and stuff like that, and coming home late. But I managed to catch you in the air, Bob, and I'm very thankful. And hopefully, maybe you can, in addition, can somehow find some kind of way, or a solution to, or an answer or something to maybe calming down this situation, because I don't think that independence is the only political option out there available. So I was kind of confused a little bit, and so were so many veterans. So we kind of like just walked away and left out in the cold, because there was nothing there. That's it, Bob.
Well, there are people that are so stuck on their own ideology that they don't have time to listen to anyone who doesn't agree with them, and that to them, the way to really listen is to find a good echo chamber and holler into it, and then say, well, yeah, I found a lot of things here that agree with me, without listening to anybody else who has a different view, right, Francis?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that may be what you're up against when you're dealing with what I refer to sometimes as the independentistas. That would be Michael Bavacqua and Trini, and I think some of the others, right?
Oh, yes, I was deeply involved with the Nation part of it. I'm not an activist anymore. What I want is just for the government to work closely with, have a better ties with, and relationship and communication with U.S. federal, whatever, and so we can maybe stabilize, like you always mention, the stability, political stability, and the growth, the development of Guam, and everything around us that's highly protected.
Well, that seems to me.
Am I making any sense?
Absolutely, Francis, and I'll be your echo chamber. Yeah, that's exactly my approach to the whole thing. I think that given where we are and how many of us there are, and the fact that we really have no natural resources, unless someone can change my mind, I think independence would not be very wise at all. We're an island of 160,000 people. No agriculture to speak of, no mines, no minerals. We've only got two industries, tourism and military, and both depend on a good relationship with the United States. So that's part of my shtick, Francis. Another part is this. I hear Bavacqua talking about independence as though it's going to be utopia, but never telling us exactly what he would envision for an independent Guam. Would we have a king? Would we have a real Magatlahi like we had back in pre-Hispanic times? Would the same thing happen to Guam that's happened to so many newly independent former colonies, and that is that the ink is hardly dry on the cession papers, and the new colony is taken over by a tin-horn dictator who Yeah, and I suspect, that could never happen here in Guam, but it's happened so many other places to former colonies that unless somebody can convince me that they've got a really good plan for independence, I'm not going to put my chips on that part of the roulette wheel.
Well, I really wanted him to just lay it out on the table. If is this your goal, is to have a complete separation from the United States, and I said, no, it's not going to happen. So that argument just flamed up, Thank you, Bob, for taking my call, and hopefully maybe you can help me out here and enlighten the folks out there that it's not going to happen.
Well, put it this way: I don't know what's going to happen. I haven't pulled my crystal ball out of the closet lately. I probably should, but I can tell you what I don't want to see happen. I don't want to see us making a bad decision and cutting our ties with the United States when it could be the worst possible thing that could happen to all of us here on the island, Francis.
Exactly. I'm with you. A lot of them are not too comfortable with my talking about it because they're all willing to die for it. And I'm just, no, man, those days are over, you know.
Understood.
The life is good, and like all we need to do is improve it and make it better.
Well, that's been my approach. You know, I start out with this: what do you do with a group of people that say, I don't want to be independent. I want to continue the relationship I have with the United States. Under the banner of decolonization, you say, well, we don't care what you want. You got to be independent. It's decolonization.
That's exactly what she was doing, trying to force feed me, you know, with something that I totally didn't understand and disapproved of for the meantime. You know, I didn't say I didn't support it, but I didn't say I was against it, but I was honest about not supporting it. You know.
Yeah, I understand. So my approach has been this, Francis. The United States, at least in 1898, if not sooner, became an imperialist power, and that's what the Spanish-American War was about. My glimpse at the Spanish-American War really wasn't that it wasn't about Cuba or even Puerto Rico. It was about the Philippines. The United States wanted a colony in the Philippines from which to conduct its China trade. So that's what happened. And in order for the United States to have the proper supply lines for the Philippines, the United States needed a couple Pacific coaling stations. So we made a treaty with the Kingdom of Hawaii in 1893, or maybe it was a little earlier for Pearl Harbor, and then later on annexed the Hawaiian Islands. And during the Spanish-American War, the United States also in the peace treaty took Guam as a coaling station. That's the only reason the United States wanted Guam. Well, not long after the Spanish-American War, ships quit burning coal and started burning oil instead. So Guam really wasn't of much use to the United States in a military sense, but the United States hung on to it, not because the United States wanted it so bad, but because they didn't want the Japanese to have it. So looking, you know, kind of projecting a little bit, had the United States not become an imperial power in 1898, I would be sitting here saying, "Hey, watashi wa nihongo wakarimasen," because we'd all be speaking Japanese, because there's no question that the Japanese would have filled the void here and taken this island over. But as it turned out, because the U.S. was an imperialist nation, that didn't happen, and instead we're under the American flag. Well, the United States treated Guam just as a possession, just sort of like a big naval station until 1950. And in 1950, that's when Guam actually became a colony, when the Organic Act was enacted. Mm-hmm. And so Guam has value to the United States, no question about it. And the United States certainly has a lot of value for Guam. So we are part of perhaps the greatest empire that has ever existed, and I want to stay there. And I think we should use our efforts to improve our situation in that empire. There are a lot of things that we could do, a lot of things that we could work out with the national government if we tried. But sitting around complaining about things that happened 100 years ago and playing the identity politics game is not getting us anywhere. Maybe it's working well for Bavacqua. Maybe it maybe it helps him with his column, but it doesn't help the people of Guam at all.
You know, I was hoping that if Abokwa pursues, you know, I hope that you take our advice decades ago when I recommended, hey, why don't you let's hire a constitutional lawyer? And everybody gave me a dirty look, and I said, all right then.
Yeah, well, of course, Bavakwa says that we shouldn't have a constitution. And see, part of that whole strategy is that if you really want Guam to be independent, you don't want government here to work well. Because people would change if they thought, oh, this isn't working well at all. And the United States is really a bad, bad country. And the United States never treated us right. And then when a guy comes along and says, well, I'll give you something better called utopia, you've already softened the market. And that's exactly what I see going on here, Francis.
Yeah, there's a lot more with the Kwai Chang regime down there where it reminds me of the CLT where you can't own the land, but a third of all your produce has to go to the government, and the remainder you sell in the market, you know, for your personal and for your existence down there, you know. So
yeah.
In the Philippines or somewhere down there, I remember 20, 40 few years ago, where if you stood out in front of the Malacanang Palace and protested the government, my friend told me that you probably would last at least 15 minutes before they gun you down.
I know what you mean, Francis. Francis, I got a break coming up here, so I really appreciate you starting this conversation off. I'm going to spend a little more time on it today, and we'll try to pick it up from time to time, okay?
All right. Thank you very much for taking my call, Bob. And your Facebook's probably lighting up, I hope.
It is. Thanks, Francis.
All right. Bye.
All right.
Business travel just got easier. Take your data plan with you for only $10 a day to all 17 data-to-go destinations. Never worry about additional data roaming charges when you go where your business needs you. The US, China, Thailand, and so much more. Have the assurance you need to check emails, surf the web, and stay connected. Call 688-2677 today to make sure your account is data-to-go ready. Docomo Pacific. Better together.
Whether you're going grocery shopping, taking the kids to the mall, or going to work, you need a reliable car that can take you where you need to go. A reliable car also needs reliable insurance. Let Nanbo Insurance make your auto insurance easy and uncomplicated. With Nanbo, you can also save big when you bundle up and insure your car, home, motorcycle, or business. Enjoy great savings up to 50%. Visit nanbo.com or call 477-9754 for more details.
Okay, so we're coming back here from the break, and I got about 7 more minutes to that gigantic, exciting, colorful halftime show that we have every day at 1700. I'm going to carry on a little bit with what Francis and I were talking about. I don't think an approach that consists primarily of whining is going to be very persuasive to Congress, and I see an awful lot of that. We have a so-called Commission for Decolonization that has not taken one step towards the decolonization of Guam. The only thing that commission is concerned about is Chamorro self-determination. And I've sorted it all out. The only Chamorro self-determination that anybody is advocating, and maybe the only one that's possible, is independence. And I have an awful lot of problems with an independent Guam. I have yet to see how it would benefit. I can't see how it would benefit me, so end of story, right? And, of course, being the magnanimous, public-spirited, idealistic person that I am, I also try to figure out how it would benefit other people. And other than the cadre of independentistas who would rise to power in what would probably be called would be named the Socialist Chamorro Republic of Guam, Prime Minister Michael Bavacqua and Minister of State Trini Torres and on, other than that small group of folks, I don't see that it would benefit anybody at all. In fact, I think it would turn us into, just another very unendowed Pacific island in a very short period of time. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see an independent Guam. I do want to see us working hard to make whatever changes we find to be desirable with our relationship with the United States. How about starting out with our own Constitution, which we've had the ability to do since the 1970s? And how about enacting our own tax code? That way we can get out from under the Internal Revenue Code, which, by the way, Robert Underwood really explained this morning. I hope Michael St. Nicholas was listening, but if I have time, I'll get into that later on this afternoon. So those are two things we could do. If we really want control of immigration, then we should petition Congress to give us control of immigration. It's possible under our current Article 3, as you were Article 4, Section 3 status. The Northern Marianas had it until they really screwed it up so bad. If that's what we're interested in. We could also ask the Congress to make inapplicable other laws of the United States that we don't think benefit us. And we could also ask the Congress to enact laws that we do think would benefit us. But for the United States Congress, 435 people in the House, how much time do you think any of them spend thinking about any state other than their own, much less our little island out here at the far side of the Pacific Ocean? I think we kind of get wrapped around our own axles so tight that we really forget what's going on. Now, if there are people here that want an independent Guam, why do they rely so heavily, almost exclusively, on what they refer to as the colonizers' government, a government created by the Organic Act, which one of the guys posted on Facebook yesterday, posted a Mike Phillips comment about what was disgusting about the Organic Act. If that's the case, if you don't like the Organic Act, then fine, let's have our own Organic Act. Let's enact our own Constitution. We could ask the Congress to change the law concerning our federal judge so that the federal judge is a lifetime appointment instead of an appointment for 10 years. It's happened in Puerto Rico. So there are a lot of things that we could do to improve our relationship with the United States. Call it what you will. Call it decolonization. Call it imperialism. You could call it a hippopotamus, and it wouldn't make any difference to me. It's what it does that really counts. And I'm not persuaded at all that those who are advocating for independence, I think they know exactly what they're doing, and I think they know exactly how to get there. And it's the identity politics, cultural Marxist approach, the gaslighting approach, convincing the people as much as they can that, wow, it's really too bad that the American flag flies over Guam. If it weren't for that, we could be living in utopia right here on Guam. Okay, we got the big halftime show coming up. Coming back from that, I think I will go to... where's my calendar here? Go to the next item on the calendar.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Getting up to speed. I'm Richard Jordan, Fox News. Members of Congress got a briefing on the ongoing tensions with Iran. Acting Secretary of Defense Pat Shanahan says he told the House and Senate that the Trump administration continues to protect American interests.
We have deterred attacks based on our reposturing of assets, deterred attacks against American forces.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer called the briefing inadequate. Iran is reportedly ramping up production of low-enriched uranium used for nuclear power. House Judiciary Democrats pledging to continue the fight after former White House counsel Don McGahn ignores a subpoena.
House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler warning former White House counsel Don McGahn that there will be consequences for defying a congressional subpoena to testify about the Mueller report.
If he does not immediately correct his mistake, this committee will have no choice but to enforce the subpoena against him.
Nadler said the committee would vote to hold McGahn in contempt of Congress and take the issue to court. The White House ordered McGahn to skip the hearing, arguing that McGahn has immunity from giving testimony to Congress. At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
McGahn's former aide Annie Donaldson and former White House Communications Director Hope Hicks have also been issued subpoenas to answer questions and provide documents to the committee. Hicks now works as an executive vice president at Fox. The U.S. and China still working towards a trade deal after President Trump said China backed away from the agreement. But Chinese Ambassador Sui Tian-kai tells Special Report with Brett Baer it was the Trump administration that changed the terms.
If we review the process of trade talks between us over the last year or so, it's quite clear it is the U.S. side that more than once changed mind overnight and broke the tentative deal already reached.
The Trump administration temporarily eased up on restrictions on Chinese tech company Huawei. This is Fox News.
Let's see now. Fast, easy, affordable. That's the best way to describe my home loan at Bank Pacific. Fast because we give quick decisions. Easy because we've cut back on the paperwork. Affordable because today's home loan rates are still so low. So see us today to refinance or consolidate or to buy or build your new home and save yourself some money.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender, FDIC. Viva Bank Pacific.
Hi, welcome to this Subway ad for the new Sweet and Smoky Steak and Guac Signature Wrap. How would you like it?
I'll take my ex-girlfriend, just checking in.
Aw.
Hey, David, it's me, just checking in. I'm doing great. Just got the new Sweet and Smoky Steak and Guac Signature Wrap from Subway. Creamy guacamole, smoky sweet with Hio mesquite sauce, and double the tender steak. They just know what I want before I do. So, yeah, things are going pretty great for me. Subway, make it what you want. Limited time only at participating restaurants. Double meat based on average 6-inch sub. Okay, bye.
Immigration officials are now placing migrants awaiting asylum court dates in various bus stations across the U.S.-Mexico border.
In the past 7 months, ending in April, the Border Patrol in just the El Centro sector has apprehended 293,000 migrants. That's a 400% increase from a year earlier. And because housing facilities are overflowing and because of legal limits on how long migrant children can be held, border agents are now loading migrants into vans and buses and driving them 150 miles away to a Greyhound bus station in San Bernardino. We saw the drop-offs firsthand in San Bernardino last week. The migrants are released pending court dates, but of course the vast majority never show up for court. Critics say the migrants shouldn't be dumped at the bus station with no resources, but migrants interviewed by Reuters say they feel safe in the U.S.
Fox's Trace Gallagher. The Alaska air carrier involved in 2 deadly float plane crashes in a week has suspended operations. The pilot and passenger of a float plane operated by Taquan Air died in a crash Monday. A judge makes special accommodations for a suspect unable to make it inside a Virginia courtroom.
Kenneth Hicks entered a guilty plea in a cocaine conspiracy case outside a Richmond, Virginia courthouse while in an ambulance. The judge says the court engaged in some extraordinary procedures to protect Hicks' dignity and deal with his health issues. The 48-year-old weighs more than 900 pounds and was incapable of making it inside the courthouse. The judge and a prosecutor sat at a table near the back of an ambulance parked in the facility's loading zone for the plea hearing with Hicks inside. Rich Dennison, Fox News.
The dearly departed in Washington state will have an alternative to burials and cremations, composting. The governor signed the bill Tuesday, making Washington the first state to approve the measure. I'm Richard Jordan, and this is Fox News.
Business travel just got easier. Take your data plan with you for only $10 a day to all 17 data-to-go destinations. Never worry about additional data roaming charges when you go where your business needs you. The US, China, Thailand, and so much more. Have the assurance you need to check emails, surf the web, and stay connected. Call 688-2677 today to make sure your account is data-to-go ready. Docomo Pacific. Better together.
In illness and in wellness, Calvo's Select Care is health care that is there for you. That's why over 80% of the Guam medical community places their trust and insures with us. We offer our members wellness and fitness programs for a healthier lifestyle and provide a comprehensive medical network on and off island to help members from unexpected illnesses. Contact Calvo's Select Care today for more information.
What a terrific halftime show. I don't know how we do it every day, Real Joe Cruz.
Me neither, sir.
Yeah, it borders on the miraculous, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but we're going to keep doing it. Okay, so we're back for the second half of Tall Tales here. We had a really good first half. A caller, Francis, who's been part of my international radio listening audience, I think as long as there's been a Tall Tales. When Tall Tales moved over here to the Point, I think Francis lost track of me for a little while, but he's back, and he makes a lot of good points. So Francis, when Francis called yesterday, I told him we would put him on the card first, and the card was Francis versus Trini, which I could also translate into those who don't want independence versus those who do. And we had a pretty good conversation. I've got a couple other items on the card that I think I can get to today. I've got Governor Leon Guerrero has apparently spoken with Admiral Phil Davidson and ascertained that we are no longer on the Schatz list. The Schatz list referring to a list of places that maybe the Marines aren't going to go. Named after Congressman Senator Brian Schatz.
Ray calls him Shots.
Shots?
Yeah, I think he's just being kind.
Calls himself Shots.
Ray, when he refers to him, he calls him Shots.
Like what you have when you go to the bar with your buddies and you throw down shots?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm calling him Schatz.
There you go.
And I found out that Schatz is a German word that means treasure. And it can also be used, as what we would call a non-querido. So you could refer to if you were German, you refer to your wife as my Schatz, my honey, my darling, something like that. So anyhow, he was responsible for establishing the Schatz list. And according to the story about Lou and Admiral Phil Davidson, we're no longer on the Schatz list. So that's cause for celebration. And then I've got to do a wrap up on yesterday's commission CCU meeting. But before I do that, I'm going to spend a little more time on what we were talking about. I did peek out of the corner of my eye and see an abundance of what looked like an abundance of Facebook comments. But before I dive in there, I want to get into some of the things that I've put on the card and never gotten to before that I think are really quite necessary for understanding some of the things we're talking about. One of those would be critical theory. Critical theory, and I've got a short piece here. It's a social theory oriented toward critiquing and changing society as a whole, in contrast to traditional theory oriented only to understanding or explaining it. Critical theories aim to dig beneath the surface of social life and uncover the assumptions that keep us from a full and true understanding of how the world works. Critical theory emerged out of the Marxist tradition, and it was developed by a group of sociologists at the University of Frankfurt, who referred to themselves as the Frankfurt School. Critical theory, as it's known today, can be traced to Marx's critique of the economy and society put forth in his many works. It's inspired greatly by Marx's theoretical formulation of the relationship between economic base and ideological superstructure, and tends to focus on how power and domination operate, in particular in the realm of the superstructure. Following Marx's critical footsteps, a Hungarian named Lukács and an Italian named Antonio Gramsci developed theories that explored the cultural and ideological sides of power and domination. Both Lukács and Gramsci focused their critique on social forces. Shortly following the period when Lukács and Gramsci developed and published their ideas, the Institute of Social Research was founded at the University of Frankfurt, and the Frankfurt School of Critical Theorists took place. It is the work of those associated with the Frankfurt School, including Horkheimer, Adorno, Fromm, Benjamin, Habermas, and Marcuse, that is considered the definition and heart of critical theory. And that's what we're talking about now, is critical theory. And if you want to know about where you could learn about critical theory, go to any mainland college or university and sign up for a course that ends in the word studies. You know, the first time I heard about people going to college and taking a course called American Studies, I said to myself, wow, that sounds really interesting. American Studies, you know, American history, no, that's not what it's about at all. It's kind of like People's History of the United States by, what's that guy's name? It'll come to me in a second. It's a compendium of all of the bad things that you could find out that you could accuse the United States of, and it involves presentism. You know, for instance, if Thomas Jefferson had slaves back around the turn of the 18th century, and Thomas Jefferson was a white man, and you are a white man, then you are guilty of the sin of slavery. That's kind of how it works. Critical theory. And one of the critical theorists was this gentleman named Gramsci, and it goes like, here's a little bit about him. The greater communist movement's infiltration into public policy, public office, and government is nothing new. In fact, it is a much-needed factor in the successful transformation of an entire society. The power to influence policy has always been the ultimate purpose of the Communist Party's infiltration. So let me see if I can get here to Gramsci. A Marxist philosopher by the name of Antonio Gramsci realized no thinking person would roll over and submit to a system that's going to enslave him. Rather, he believed one could, through years, if not decades, slowly subvert a culture in which the public would be influenced into Marxist ideology. And his deluded idea of someday achieving an egalitarian utopian, he wanted the victims to actually enjoy being a party to a collective and repressive regime. Well, there's more here about Antonio Gramsci, the Frankfurt School, etc. But let's see, I've got Michael on the line. Which is this? Is this CCU, Michael? Hello, Michael.
No, it's Michael Israel.
Hey, how you doing, Michael? Long time no hear.
Yeah, I've been off island a lot.
Okay.
The Frankfurt School is an area of study that I have found absolutely mind-blowing. The Institute of Social Relations or something, it started out in Germany, founded by, it's very interesting, all these people involved were sons of quasi-wealthy. They weren't truly wealthy, but they were wealthy enough that they didn't actually have to work a single day of their life. And instead, their fathers, who were mostly merchants, supported them. And they sat around and they literally made crap up. So they were socialist pre-World War II. And basically another group of socialists were jealous of the Frankfurt School, Hitler. And so basically they basically in 33 or 37, they ran away to the United States. And they landed in New York City, where they got jobs working at Columbia University in New York City. And basically you can almost trace all the absolute claptrap that's being taught in all your elite universities throughout the United States now from those professors that were brought in from originally Frankfurt, Germany, to escape the Nazis. Now, after the war, a few years after the war, that main group had returned to Germany. However, they had already indoctrinated a group of professors who then went on to infiltrate up into Harvard, Yale, and then eventually they moved over to, I believe it was UCLA, before they started moving north up into Stanford and Berkeley. And they kept teaching new pupils this worthless concept that you were describing earlier, which is continuing to be taught throughout our universities. And it's just amazing how what they predicted, how they could subvert a society by educating them with nonsense. And it worked.
It's worked so well that it's frightening, Michael. You know, the Frankfurt School guys were communists, and they bought into the Marxist idea that the workers of the world would unite in the form of violent revolution. Well, in World War I, young Germans were killing young Russians, and it just didn't work at all. So then they regrouped and said, well, the way to do it is to infiltrate the institutions of the Western world, like the colleges, and we'll do it that way. And that's what they've done.
Yep. Well, what's fascinating to me was every single one of these founders of that institute were young men who are totally idle. They did not work because their parents, their family had a little bit of wealth. One of them, the original founder, he used some money he got from his dad, who was a small businessman in Argentina. They were Germans, but living in Argentina, and then he moved. They were sent to Frankfurt to attend higher education, and they absolutely, I mean, just unbelievable waste of time and talent. But what's amazing is these guys have never freaking worked a day in their life, and they're educating the working class on how to work. It's just amazing.
It is indeed, Michael, and it's happening in our American universities. It's happening right here on Guam. We're seeing the identity politics is a big part of it. We're seeing it happen right here, and unfortunately, they've done this kind of under the radar, sliding. You know, the '60s was the beginning of it, the revolution of the '60s, and it's carried on right now. So you can't really expect to go to an American university anymore and actually learn anything except how to hate the United States.
Yeah, I mean, it's and like you said, it's all those studies where instead of having a true study like you expected to see one, where they sat down and did vigorous examination of the books, the history, they sit around and they navel graze. They look at their navel and they talk about how they feel about something without any real serious study about the matter. I mean, African American studies, for instance, could be a fascinating area. Some of the historical context of what's going on, but they don't talk about that. They do no research whatsoever. They sit around and they talk about how they feel about it or how they should feel about things, and all they do is want to get people riled up and mad.
True enough, Michael. Well, I'm going to keep.
Here, someone is aware of the Frankfurt School, because they're a very scary bunch. And what I really detest about them is how freaking lazy they are.
Really?
Never worked a day in their life. Lived off the wealth of their parents.
Well, if they'd had jobs, they wouldn't have had time to come up with these crazy ideas.
Well, yeah. I mean, Marxism, for instance, Karl Marx and his buddy Engels, who actually finished, he was actually writing a history book, The History of Mankind. The first couple volumes were not bad. I mean, he actually did capsulate. But the problem was he had feudal eyes examining a capitalist system, which was fairly new at the time. And so he did not understand. And the idea was that this revolution would be all self-effectuating, because as the society got richer, the wealth would flow only to the wealthiest, and the people on the bottom would be competing against each other and would not share in that growth. Well, that didn't happen. They expected the wealthiest countries, France, Germany, and England, to have the first revolution. And in fact, it was the weakest and poorest country, Russia, that had the first revolution. And then that's where they changed it, like you said, at World War I, where they changed it and said, we need to spark the revolution. And that's where you have these activists. They call themselves activists. Their job is to activate the people who are too lazy and stupid to know what's good for them. Dealing with communists and socialists and, I don't want to say Democrats, but dealing with these type of people is very irritating, because they always treat the people as dumb, mindless people who don't know what's good enough for them, and that they need to tell people what's good for them.
True enough, Michael. Well, Michael, I'm glad to find a kindred spirit here that's as alert. I thought I was crying in the wilderness here for a while, but I'm glad you're out there, and I'm going to keep beating this drum.
Yeah, there's a lot of us out there, but we're cowed and told that we're a lot of things. We have our beliefs, but there are a lot of people in support of this who are tired of being treated like sheep and cogs in a machine. We're all individuals. We all have our individual spirit and individual talents, and we're all different from each other. We're not going to be lumped into groups, and that's what they want to do. They want us to lump us into the masses and then set us against each other.
True enough. Well, appreciated the conversation. Thanks for calling, Michael.
Thank you. All right, bye.
So I'm just going to go a little bit more on Frankfurt School, and then I'm intrigued by some of the stuff I'm seeing out of the corner of my eye on Facebook here, and then we'll go to that. And I hope I got time to talk about the CCU before the end of the program. So here's more from this same article here. Born in 1923, a group of determined Germans devised a plan to subvert Western culture and rot it from within. When Hitler came to power, the institute was closed and its members by various routes fled to the United States and migrated to major U.S. universities: Columbia, Princeton, Brandeis, California, and Berkeley. Here are some of their stated goals, a bit about how they were to be achieved. 1. A creation of racism offenses. Has that happened? 2. Continual change to create confusion. 3. The teaching of sex and homosexuality to children. The undermining of schools and teachers' authorities. 5. Huge immigration to destroy identity. 6. The promotion of excessive drinking. Now, maybe back in the time that these goals were put together, alcohol was the major intoxicant. Maybe they weren't as modern as we are with a newer form of intoxicant called, what's it called?
Beer, sir?
No, that's alcohol.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was thinking it starts with a C or an L.
Oh, cannabis.
Cannabis, that's it,
Cannabis.
yeah.
Marijuana.
Yeah. Emptying churches, an unreliable legal system with bias against victims of crime, dependency on the state or state benefits, control and dumbing down of media, encouraging the breakdown of the family. Boy, are we seeing that right now. One of the main ideas of the Frankfurt School was to exploit Freud's idea of pansexualism, the search for pleasure, the exploitation of differences between the sexes, the overthrowing of the traditional relationship between men and women to further their aims. They would, 1, attack the authority of the father, deny the specific roles of father and mother, and wrest away from families their right as primary educators of their children. 2, abolish differences in education of boys and girls. 3, abolish all forms of male dominance, hence the presence of women in the armed forces. 4, declare women to be an oppressed class and men as oppressors. And that's the key. You know, the whole identity politics thing depends on identifying oppressors and oppressed. In other words, it's always victims and victimology. So the first thing that is necessary to start the identity politics phenomenon is to find the victims. This person is a victim because he is a black or Native American or female or whatever. And of course, as soon as you find a victim, you've got to find the villain. And that's what it's all about, sorting out the victims and the villains. So all of the victims should unite to overthrow the villains. And that's really what neo-Marxism is all about. And so when you see, the knee-jerk retreat to identity politics, the use of the word oppressor, colonizer, etc., in my estimation, that's exactly what you're looking at. So I'm going to keep coming back to the Frankfurt School, cultural Marxism, neo-Marxism, and try to relate it to our situation here as is necessary. Now let me take a peek at Facebook here and see what I've got. I've got James Howard, part of the Triple J Rangers, says FSM has a great relationship with the U.S. and China. How'd they do that, Judge? Well, they did it with the United States by, in effect, selling much of their sovereignty to the United States. That's how they did it as far as the United States is concerned. Back in the day when we used to use this term, we would have characterized the FSM, the three freely associated states, as protectorates. The United States provides for their defense and their diplomacy, and in return for that, the United States, of course, promises to defend them, and, of course, gives them huge chunks of money and gives them free access to the United States. It's interesting to see that over 18,000 people from the FSM have come to Guam as habitual residents. Now, under the compacts, American citizens could go and reside in the freely associated states. I don't know anybody that's done it. I've heard of one person. I wonder why that is. As far as China, I don't know that the relationship is that good. I know that China has ambitions towards the freely associated states, and I talked yesterday about how the Chinese, in a fit of anger when Palau sidled up to Taiwan, would not allow Chinese to travel to Palau anymore and really hurt their tourist industry. And see, I've got Brad Hewitt here saying it's amazingly ironic that there are millions risking their life to get into the United States, yet there is a very small but militant few who want to break away from the U.S. Makes no sense whatsoever. Brad goes on to say, FSM has a, quote, great relationship with the USA because of a relationship with China. It's not mutually beneficial. China would love to take over those islands in a heartbeat. But check this out. If China was so friendly with FSM, what is the impact on China receiving FSM migrants? China wants to control over the territory only. That's not such a great relationship after all. And Chris Chip, I wonder if this guy has a chip on his shoulder. Yeah, I think we've seen him once before. He says, Bong, the counterintelligence, is out of control in the region, and it's sometimes in your face and not covert. Bong, the counterintelligence. Maybe he meant Bob, the counterintelligence, is out of control in the region, and it's sometimes in your face and not covert. And we got Jesse Limtiaco, purely economical. Millions of people outside America work for only $1 and $3 a day. I wonder why that is, Jesse Limtiaco. Why is it that millions of people outside the United States work for $1 or $3 a day? Nobody in the United States works for $1 or $3 a day. It must be a coincidence. Yeah. And then we've got Brad coming back. Trump has met with U.S. citizens from Guam. Just because he's not going door to door in the island doesn't at all mean he doesn't welcome the government of Guam leadership or even private citizens in his office. Shelley Gibson and others would let you know Trump is indeed welcoming to everyone. And then Chris Chip comes back. Guam becomes independent. People better brush up on chopsticks use. I see what he's saying. You know, in this part of the world, a very small island with a very small population with some extremely powerful neighbors might be at something of a risk, even if it were independent. I don't think countries like China and Russia would be put off much by a defense of Guam saying, well, you know, you can't come in here because you don't respect the Chamorro culture. I don't think that would work very well with China or Russia as far as an independent Guam is concerned. So we've got our seventh inning stretch coming up. Tony, why don't you take a good stretch, a good seventh inning stretch, and I'll pick you up right after the break.
2-for-1 dinner time is back at Ruby Tuesday Guam. That's 2 fresh garden bars, 2 tasty entrees, and a sweet dessert to share for just $25.99. 2-for-1 dinner time for a limited time at Ruby Tuesday Guam.
If you're driving, chances are you'll need gas soon. And by the growl in your tummy, a trip to the grocery store too. But don't just buy gas and groceries without getting double miles. Instead, apply for the new United credit card from First Hawaiian Bank and start earning double miles towards your next trip. Gas, groceries, getaway. With the new United credit card, apply at FHB.com. First Hawaiian Bank, member FDIC. Equal housing lender. Additional terms, conditions, and restrictions apply.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
If I asked you to give me 10 minutes and I'd make you healthier and happier, would you do it? I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of things you can do in 10 minutes that you'll be glad you did.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
So that's our seventh inning stretch, and I had a caller on the line. I guess he didn't want to wait through the break, but if you call back, caller, I'll put you on right away. I don't have another break until 10 minutes to 6. So in the meantime, I'm going to keep gazing at Facebook comments here. Chris Chip says Guam better if Guam becomes independent, people better brush up on your chopsticks use, because big countries like China and Russia are not very idealistic. If you look at what China's trying to do with their third ring, and taking over those islands in the South China Sea, etc. If the Chinese could come in here and take over, kind of like they did in Saipan up until the typhoon came along, it would be all over. And I've got Don Edkilani. You should point out that fact perspective to leaders of the compact countries. Yeah, good point. And then Brad says, purely economical, nothing to do with stupid socialist Democrat politics in those countries they are fleeing from. It's high time you snap yourself back to reality. Wow. James Howard says, I think China is using FSM to count military on Guam, kind of like their South China Seas, and take control on Pacific fishing lanes and commerce. Yeah, they'd certainly like to take over the fishing lanes. I mean, the sea lanes, no question about it. And this is not because of some spirit of disinterested generosity on the part of the Chinese. The Chinese approach to things is that through much of history, China was the greatest country in the world. And they were kind of out of the game for 300 or 400 years, but now they're back. And they're going to be the greatest country of the world again. James Howard, as you were, Jesse Limtiaco, self-righteous Brad strikes again. So if you can't beat him on his argument, Jesse, try an argumentum ad hominem, if that's all you got. Okay, let's see. I got a phone call here from our Carl. Hello, our Carl.
Hey, Bob. Sorry, I meant to call in earlier, but I got kind of sidetracked with some things. But I did catch part of the conversation about China. China has over $1 trillion designated to what they call the One Belt, One Road initiative. And what they do is they go around to poorer countries and they load them up with these massive loans. And when the country is no longer able to meet the loan payments, they use that leverage to gain. They've done it a few times to gain like 99-year leases on key properties like ports and properties that they can use for strategic purposes. There's for anyone that's interested, there's a very excellent YouTube channel called China Uncensored, which has hundreds of excellent videos on China's backstage maneuvering, which isn't talked about much in the mainstream media, but it's quite good, and I've learned a great deal for anyone that's interested in learning about it.
Okay, but the point...
One Road initiative is
the point I wanted to make, Carl, is that if it weren't the United States in this part of the world maintaining stability, it would be it would take on a different form of stabilization, and the form of stabilization would be Chinese, right?
Oh, absolutely. And there's been many countries that have also already fallen victim to this, what they call debt trap diplomacy, and they're in deep. I don't know if there was any backstage, secret money given to leaders to sell out their countries, but many of these countries are extremely poor and they can't afford these massive multi-billion-dollar loans. Many of them are in Africa, and they are trapped, and they have to give over control of these key assets, these key properties, key lands, and because of this leverage that the Communist Chinese Party has over them, and it's very tragic.
Well, thanks for helping me make that point, Carl. I really appreciate it.
I actually meant to call in sooner because I wanted to ask you about something, and I know there's not that much time, but maybe you can put it on your agenda for tomorrow. I ran across an article online about, which I'd seen some hint of before, but I never really paid attention to it. But today I saw something that made me curious, and I clicked into it. It's about a bill that is going before Congress called the Equality Act, and it sounds kind of harmless, and I really didn't think much about it. But when I read into it, my eyes really opened up.
I'll tell you what I'll do, Carl. I'll put an item on the card, our Carl versus the Equality Act. How does that sound?
All right, yeah, I would like to learn more about it and your thoughts on it, because I think the potential for the damage that can be done to national and local society are really quite large.
Okay, you got it, Carl.
If you do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I want to pick up back here with Facebook, Tom, and then I'll get back to you after I go through some of the stuff on Facebook here. Let's see if I got my place here. Hang on just a second here. This thing is very delicate. Yeah. Chris Chip. Guam becomes independent. People better brush up on chopstick use. And then Brad Hewitt says, purely economical, nothing to do with stupid socialist Democrat politics in those countries. And then James Howard chimes in, and then Jesse Limtiaco says, self-righteous Brad strikes again. And that's when I commented that, you know, if you can't meet the argument that someone advances, then switch to argumentum ad hominem. And then Brad says, absolutely, noodles, chopsticks, and kung fu pajamas. And then Jesse Limtiaco comes back with many Chamorro independent advocates cite, and he put a couple of links there. Well, that's pretty persuasive. Brad Hewitt says, if being so fortunate to have been born in the greatest nation is self-righteous, then I'm guilty as charged. And Jesse Limtiaco, affirming that indigenous people are equal to all other peoples, while recognizing the right of all peoples to be different, to consider themselves different, and to be respected as such. That's not a complete sentence. I wonder if that's a statement or a question or a challenge or what. When I look at it, you know, indigenous peoples, I would have to go along and say that every person is equal to every other person, and every person has the right to be as different as he wants to be. So, as different as they want to be, so long as their being different doesn't harm anybody else. There's nothing too radical about that, Jesse Limtiaco. And then Jesse Limtiaco says, convinced that control by indigenous people over developments affecting them and their lands, territories, and resources will enable them to maintain and strengthen their institutions, cultures, and traditions, and to promote their development in accordance with their aspirations and needs. It looks like you're copying and pasting something from somewhere else. I don't know exactly what your point is. If you want to make a point, you kind of need to put it down, Jesse Limtiaco. Then Jesse goes on to say, emphasizing the contribution of demilitarization of lands and territories of indigenous peoples to peace, economic and social progress and development, understanding and friendly relations. Well, you're very good at copying and pasting, but what's the point of the copying and pasting? Then we have come up with something that looks original. Brad, an American saying his country is the greatest nation, is like a person trying to say their mother's cooking is the greatest. Yeah, probably. My mom was a pretty good cook. And then Brad comes back and says, if you're trying to insinuate that Philippines didn't become socialist after independence, I want you to know there are many militant groups trying to become both independent from the Philippines and others attempting to take freedom away. Fortunately, they have a halfway decent military of very long history of fighting and defending themselves to put a stop to this nonsense. Unfortunately, that's not true here. The culture is completely different. Brad Hewitt says, Jesse, turn in your passport now. And Jesse comes back and says, Brad, why are you even living on Guam if you hate the people so much? So I don't know. Maybe you're reading something in here that I didn't see, Jesse. And James Howard, go to YouTube, Judge. It's all in the cloud. And Brad says, I don't hate the people at all living on Guam. Guam, USA has benefits that stateside residents do not realize. In many ways, Guam residency is just like being a resident of any state. Take the good and emphasize it while trying to repair the negative. That's kind of what I said a little earlier. Donik Edkilani, democracy on Guam could be improved by first requiring everything to go to debate. Parenthesis, the smell test, before Bob Klitzkie and a council of Guam elders who are 70 years old and older, who have resided on Guam at least 45 or 50 years, of which the council is comprised of 50% having been born on Guam. So that's a great idea, council of elders. You got to be 70 years old, lived on Guam for 45 or 50 years, and of the council, half would be born here, and apparently the other half wouldn't have to be born here. That's a great idea. James Howard says, home of the CIA. Brad says the Frankfurt School is frightening. And Jesse Limtiaco comes back and says, Brad Hewitt, that's fine, but please don't discredit the advocacy of Chamorro people who are for an independent Guam. Well, here we go again with people. I would discredit, someone that I didn't agree with, who I thought should be discredited. But this idea that a person can't advance an argument unless he considers a, quote, people, is exactly what we're talking about. And to phrase it in those terms, don't discredit the advocacy of Chamorro people who are for an independent Guam. Richard Leone, talking about Little Lulu, spoke to the Admiral, excused the Guam public for thinking that they can be replaced, moved, or demoted. Lou says he made a promise, no black. Yeah, well, that's okay. Brad Hewitt comes back and says, keep doing what you're doing, guys. It's certainly entertaining. James Howard, power not to the people. Brad Hewitt, Guam legislature and advisors is the local equivalent to the Frankfurt School. Yeah, the name of the program's Tall Tales, Brad, but I don't know. That's maybe a little bit too far. Identity politics, what do you call it when the U.S. Navy and Japanese forced to learn English and Japanese? That stuff stayed with them for their lives. Well, and that's what I mentioned a little earlier, because the United States, 100 years ago or 50 years ago or whatever, because government officials did something, I'm supposed to feel guilty right now, or at least Brad Hewitt is supposed to feel bad about it right now. It's called presentism. To take today's moral theory and apply it to what happened a long time ago and then blame the people who happen to be around right now. Jesse Limtiaco, the U.S. Navy told that's what Americans did to Chamorros. Yeah, they just really beat them up bad. The U.S. Navy told our grandparents they were dumb to think for themselves. Now, it's nice to say stuff like that, Jesse, but where does that come from? The United States Navy. The whole United States Navy told everyone's grandparents that they were dumb to think for themselves. James Howard comes back and said, divide and conquer, Judge. That's how you dominate. Brad Hewitt, and it helped. Becoming America moved Guam forward a tremendous amount. Jesse Limtiaco, around 1900, all the way up to the invasion of the Japanese invasion, the U.S. #1 goal was to make Chamorro people learn English and learn American ideology. Number one goal. That's why the Navy came here. You know, you could see the folks back in the Pentagon. We've got to send Navy personnel into Guam so that the people there will learn English in the American way. Jesse, you know, between 1898 and 1941, the U.S. policy towards the people of Guam, if there was a policy, would at worst have been benign neglect. It was kind of a situation. Well, I don't have time for this today. I would really like to get into this, but maybe we could pick it up tomorrow. I got a couple of phone calls on the line. I've got Anthony and R. Tom. I got 10 minutes. I'll pick up R. Tom and then Anthony and sign off for the day.
Here at APL, our core values give the company its heart and soul. Whether it's connecting your business with our global network through our newly enhanced service or investing our efforts into giving back to the community, APL is committed to serving you. We humbly honor the opportunity to find innovative solutions for you and your business. To learn more about our enhanced service, call 588-4651 or visit www.apl.com/Guam for more details.
So, our Tom, here we are at the call to the post at Churchill Downs. Oh, this is not our Tom. Oh, I hit the wrong button. This is Anthony. Okay, sorry, our Tom. I'll get to you in just a second. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, Uncle Bob. Tony.
Hi, Tony.
Okay, two things, sovereignty and then political self-determination. We keep criticizing Bavaca because he's really proactive in the independent movement. The Commission of Decolonization is supposed to contact each of the three task forces, right? Free association, statehood, and independence. So why don't we start criticizing the statehood people? They're not opening their mouth. And the free association people, they're not opening their mouth. With Mike and his group, they're very proactive. They're PhDs. They're well educated. They know the American way. And why do we keep ragging on them? We should rag on the others that don't come forward and do that, no?
Not the way I see it, Tony. The way I see it, Bavaca is preaching a false dialogue. And it's better not to say anything than to continually say the wrong thing. So that's why. And the Commission on Self-Determination, as you were, on decolonization has done nothing about decolonization. It's all about Chamorro independence between Bavaca and Juan Pat Borja.
No, where's the statehood people and the free association people?
I don't know, and frankly, I'm not that interested.
No, well, you have to be. Those are the three options that the federal American government allow.
No, those are not the three options that the American government allow. Those are the three options that have been foisted on the public by a small but vocal group of activists. Those are not the three options that the United States requires. If the United States would be not opposed to the people here saying, we like it the way it is, leave us alone.
Oh, yeah. No, the U.S., they have a big interest in the Pacific because if they vacate the Pacific, the other, like China and those other nations will take over. It's the domino effect all the way going back.
That's exactly what I said a little earlier. And I said, if there's an independent Guam, what happens to an independent Guam when those big nations dominate the Pacific?
Yeah, well, you got to become an independent Guam, and now the independent Guam can have a place at the table. FAS.
Well, if it's China, an independent Guam is going to have a place under the table, Tone. Ask the other places that China has been. Ask the Uyghurs. Ask the Tibetans. Ask the Taiwanese. Guam would not, if China came over, Guam would not have a place at the table. Guam would be out at the back door.
Do you remember the president of the FAS telling Guam, this is not about you guys. They have a place at the table. Guam don't have a place at the table. That's their negotiation about whether or not they can come to Guam and take over Guam.
Do I remember what?
No, Buster, I'm going to email you, okay? But the president of the FSM made a comment that their relationship is directly with the United States, not with Guam. You don't remember that?
No, but it's a big so what. Of course, FSM's relationship would be with the United States, not with Guam. Our relationship is with the United States, not with the FSM.
Okay, let's go back to sovereignty.
Go back to sovereignty?
Sovereignty, all of the 50 states have sovereignty, and they're part of the federal government. Do you remember that B-52 that had cruise missiles in it that flew over 4 states, right, from Wyoming down to Barksdale Air Force Base in Florida?
I didn't catch the question, Tone. What was it?
Okay.
What's the question?
The sovereignty of each state.
Yeah.
Okay. From Wyoming to Florida, a B-52 flew over the airspace of 4 different states. Each governor filed a protest, and the commander of that military that involving the B-52 with the cruise missile got relief of his duty. Okay? That's sovereignty.
No, that's not sovereignty. Yeah, let's talk sovereignty. When did Guam ever have sovereignty, Tony?
Never.
Okay, so what you're doing now is you're saying that the United States is bad because it doesn't give Guam something that it never had, right?
Guam is one of those, what do they call that, the mistress, man? They want to leave here. You remember the first BRAC? They didn't care that people were going to lose their houses. They just left the island. They're coming back.
And your point is?
My point is, we're just something to kick around.
That's a really persuasive argument, Tony. that's very convincing. Tony, it's been interesting, but my program's over. You can call tomorrow if you feel like it.
I do.
So, thus ends. Sorry, Tom, I didn't get to you today. Maybe I'll call in early tomorrow, and I'll put you on right away. I pushed the wrong button there and got Tony instead of you. Thus ends another exciting, informative, entertaining episode of Tall Tales. So the real Joe Cruz and I will be back tomorrow with more of the same. Thank you.